Hi, everyone. Looks like we've reached critical mass to get started. Welcome. Good afternoon. I'm Brandon Sagitz, Director of Customer Marketing and Industry Relations at Ferrara. I handle display and point of sale activity at Ferrara. In addition, I manage all of our trade shows and sit on industry committees as a liaison for Ferrara. One of those happens to be the NCSA. And as co chair of the mentoring uh, committee, we've started a webinar or a series of educational videos that we want to do on mentoring. And the first one is coming up shortly with Todd Starsovich. A little bit more on the NCA. It was founded in 1899 as a community of industry professionals to come together to share ideas and form relationships aimed at building and strengthening the confectionery industry. Today, more than 120 years later, over our members represent all disciplines within the confectionery industry: manufacturers, brokers, retailers, distributors, and suppliers. We are honored to have members across the globe who continue to focus on the common goal of furthering the industry growth through our pillars of education, mentoring, fellowship, and recognition. The NCSA is proud to administer the Candy Hall of Fame, which is universally recognized as the highest honor an individual can receive within the confectionery industry. The annual Candy Hall of Fame weekend offers members, family, friends, and colleagues the opportunity to celebrate people who make the industry great. Save the date, as this year's 2023 Candy Hall of Fame inductions will take place October 19th to the 22nd in Tampa, Florida. With that, we'll jump into our content for today. Mentoring as a career catalyst. With us is Todd Starsovich, live for our Q&A at the end. Participants, you'll see a Q&A section. You can enter all your questions there. Feel free throughout the presentation to put your questions in there, and we will field them at the end and have a robust conversation. With that, we'll get started. Well, thank you, Todd, for being here. This is Mentoring as a Career Catalyst. This is volume 1 in the NCSA's Mentoring Education Series. And I went straight to the well to find you, and you have a lot to offer the candy industry as a whole and what you have done with your podcast. So I think we wanted to get into quickly who you are, and then I'll go into probably what I am, and then we'll get into what Career Catalyst is, I think. So we should.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Brandon. And for everyone, here, like Brandon and I have known each other for a long time, long time. So he's definitely, I'm really honored to do this with him because, he came to me and asked, and I think this sounds like an exciting topic, and it's super important topic. But before we get going, like Brandon said, I'm Todd Starsovich. I got a couple of hats that I wear. I am the head of North America for Rema, which is a kids outdoor brand that's based in Finland, but obviously the operation in North America reports into me. I'm also a co-owner with my wife. We own a in-home skilled nursing and home care agency here in Greensboro, North Carolina. And she does most of the day-to-day operations, but it's a business that we certainly co-own and co-operate, which gives us a very interesting kind of perspective on life. We're kind of putting clothes on young kids and then taking care of, sort of older folks and people that have special needs and things like that. So very interesting perspective and thing. But I think more, importantly for this discussion, I'm also during that period when we bought Bright Star Care here in Greensboro, I actually started a podcast called Career Catalyst, and it was based on, focused basically on individuals' career journeys, right? The whole idea is to allow for different professionals to share their story with the goal to offer people a resource to kind of listen to these different perspectives on different career journeys. And I'll tell you, kind of how it came up. Like I said, I was kind of going through a moment in my own career about 3 or probably more like 4 years ago. And I had been in big corporate America. I worked for a massive apparel kind of conglomerate here in North Carolina. I was part of the spin out that they had done And I just needed to figure out what I wanted to do. I knew I really liked being in North Carolina. I really liked, the situation we had down here, but I didn't love the job. I mean, it was, for me personally, it wasn't a great fit in terms of the energy that you spend in big corporate doing things that I just probably wasn't great at, the way that you have to kind of navigate and operate and things like that. And I went back to kind of that kind of personal assessment of what you wanted to do. And I wound up talking to 100 people. Now, this is before COVID, so there was coffees and, a beer here and there, or lunch. And I just tried to kind of get a perspective on what I wanted to do and what I should consider and how I should consider it and things like that. And it kind of got me thinking about, man, number one, everyone's career journey is unique. Like you have to form your own career. Like you can't read a manual and go, okay, this is my career path. I mean, I think there's probably certainly some fields where it's close, right? If you're going to be a doctor and you're going to be an eye doctor, like there's certainly, a lot of similarities, but there's you'd be surprised at how much there is variability within it that would make it unique to that individual. So I think there's that embracing this kind of, it's a unique thing and it's personal is number one. And I think number two is it is, because it's so personal, it requires a lot of perspective that you just can't obtain on your own. It requires input. It requires, sort of people reflecting information back onto you to help build what you're going to do. And it kind of got me thinking about, man, like I'm having these conversations, why not record them and then, just publish them and then, try to make it a resource for people so they can listen to good, smart, successful people talk about their career journey in their voice and let people kind of take away what they want. And that's why they tend to be a little bit on the long side, about an hour or so. And they tend the goal is I don't talk at all. Like my job, what I see myself as, is just try to move them through the conversation. Yeah.
It's a great segue is the whys. And also, like, I think when going back and listening to your podcast, it was a total aha moment to like, this is all already out here and you've already done the work. If you don't know where to go, this is a place where it's very thought-provoking information to get you thinking about what I want to do next, or I never thought of that as an idea. And I think bringing out those issues where you may go down the wrong path, but you needed to go down that wrong path in order to find the right way.
Absolutely.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
And I think I wanted to bring this to the association and bring this to the industry as we try to look into mentoring. And the connection is there, is that when you go through the podcast, there's a common denominator, and a lot of them had mentors and and people that they look to in order to broaden their career or make better decisions in their life, because they wanted others to be involved in it to make sure they were making the correct one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say one just quick comment on that. I think if you listen to the episodes we published, like I said, it started with about 100 conversations and I recorded about 40 and I published about 30 so far, right? And if you can listen to some of the conversations, you'll find that no one would tell you you're making a good or bad decision. And they wouldn't even say they made a good or bad decision necessarily, because in the end, it was a decision that moved them forward, right? Like I think one or two of the guests actually used those words exactly. Like, as long as it's a decision to move you forward, not necessarily up, not necessarily like not from a money or title or anything like that. Just, are you moving yourself to a new spot? And if you get to that new spot, it might not work out, but like you're getting so much experience and exposure every time you go through something like that at least for the right reasons, then, you're gonna continue to make the right, I think, progressions. Sorry.
No, that's good. And I think we wanted to pull out of that too, is that, you kind of mentioned that there are, like, you take a 3-prong approach of questions that you ask, or stops along the path of their career. Can you go into a little bit what those were and why you picked them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I keep the structure of the conversations on Career Catalyst super simple. Like, one, it makes it easy for the guest. Two, it allows for me to not talk because, as you could probably tell already, I like to talk a lot. So, like in the format of the podcast, I want the guest to be the one talking. It's about them, and so the actual prep list is fairly simple. It's it's really like 5 topics, but one of the topics within it is this kind of career journey, and it really focuses in on what I would call like 3 kind of primary points, because most of the guests I purposely target guests that are what I call like middle career, right? So they're probably mid 30s to mid late 40s or very early 50s, right? Someone who's gone through enough career to have maybe some bumps and bruises, maybe a couple of interesting pivots, but they're not on the they're not on the horizon yet, like they're not kind of thinking about retirement or whatever. So they've done enough, but they're not done. Also, they probably are close enough, because again, when I started this, I was thinking my audience needs to be 19 to 25. That was what I was kind of going for, was that audience. And so I wanted to make sure, as I asked these people the questions, like these 3 points are: where did it start, right? College, we usually, like, what college, where'd you go, why, what was your major? And maybe somewhat surprising, not surprising at all, like most of the time people talk about, like, I had no idea what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be when I was 18 or 19 years old, or I thought for sure this is what I want to do. And then by the time they got to 24 or 25, they're like, this is not what I want to do. The second part is like, really, there's, and almost every guest has it, like a pretty big pivot point, right? Like, I'm chucking along in my accounting agency or my accounting firm, or I'm chucking along in corporate America, or I'm chucking along in, being a pilot or something. And then all of a sudden I get this opportunity to go do something completely different than I thought I would be doing by this point. And it was a big decision point. Could have been changing where I live. It could have been changing what I'm doing. Those massive career pivot moments is number 2, because that's where you get all the lessons, right? The what you were thinking about before, and then the outcome of it. And then the third one is what you're doing now, right? So, like, you stand where you're at today and you look back and you kind of assess those decision points. What is it that you believe you've learned? What are you thinking about as your next step? Like, that's kind of how I frame up the conversation. Where does it start? What was a massive pivot point along the way, and where are you at right now? And that seems to work fairly well for the people that have listened to it. Now, I mentioned my audience is 19, where I was shooting for 19 to 25. The largest amount of listeners are 38 to 44 years old. Because, and what I've learned, or what I was learning, and this is again why I'm trying to maybe adjust the format a little bit, is that is when a lot of people have a career pivot moment. Yeah. So
I mean, you see that there's and also people are at a point in their career where they got a pulse on it, and they want to make sure they're making the right choices, right? And they're going to take advantage of their whole network, as well as resources that are out there that they to try and help make that decision, probably, right? And I think
it's certainly awareness. I mean, it's certainly awareness driven. Like, if you think about it, when I was in my early 20s, I mean, me, I mean, I was making dumb decisions probably left and right, like moving to Detroit to go get an unpaid internship. Like, come on. But of course, what it led to was I met my wife, which was fantastic, right? And so you make, it's a lot easier to make a lot of maybe what at the time seems kind of wild idea, and kind of like choices, like, well, I'll go do that, that's fine, like, whatever. Or you don't really have the, like, what does it mean, or whatever, or you always have that kind of fallback. But as you get older, you kind of get married, you have kids, you have a mortgage, and all of a sudden you got to go, okay, stop. Is this where I want to be, right? Like, do I want this job? Can I see myself in this type of company, culture, organization, place, whatever it is, in 15 years? Because if I don't make this decision when my kids are this little, or I'm at this point in my life, I'm probably not going to be able to make the decision as easily. Doesn't mean it's foreclosed on, but as easily in 5 or 10 years or something like that. And I think there's an awareness point that that's part of why I see that listenership the way it is.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite things too about the podcast is the DeLorean question, and being able to go back and visit yourself and tell yourself some information that get you by is very interesting in how people approach that.
Yeah.
And, I'd like, potentially, I don't know if anyone's interviewed you for your own podcast. So I'm going to throw that gauntlet right now and say, what is that? What is that? What would you go tell yourself?
Yeah. Well, let me talk about the DeLorean question, and then I'll answer it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where we come from?
I tend to, you're not the first person around, at least the career catalyst thing, that try to turn it around on me. And so the DeLorean question, what Brandon's talking about, when you listen to it, I ask every guest the DeLorean question, right? So the DeLorean obviously is the vehicle in Back to the Future. That's how they actually go back and forth in time. It's a time traveling vehicle. It's actually the model's a DeLorean DMC, right? DeLorean Motor Company. Cool car from the 70s and 80s turned into a time machine. Anyways, I ask every guest that. Part of the reason I ask every guest that is because I'm trying to get them to kind of go back to some place when they were 20 to 24 years old, right? Like, because if you ask someone like, what would you do differently? Yeah, I think you get, whatever. But I'm really trying to make them kind of think about, if I could go back into time with my machine and sit there in 2001 when I'm sitting on this couch in Marquette, Michigan going, should I go to Detroit? Or should I, for you, should I take this job, full-time job at this company I've been interning with every summer, right? You know what I mean? So
I think that's put that quotes right now, like to the people listening and those younger people out there. If you take nothing else away, is to go back to those podcasts and look at the DeLorean question as a complete takeaway. Now, like, there's your wealth of information, and I think that's one of a fun way to do it, I think.
Yeah, and it's usually in the back third of the conversation. So if you listen to the last 15 minutes or so, you're probably going to catch the DeLorean question. So, and I'll say this about the answer to the DeLorean questions: not a single one. Now, granted, this is not an extensive list of guests yet, but like, no one that I've talked to in that scenario has said, "Man, I really effed up," or "I really screwed up." Like, I made massive decisions and it really crushed me. And, I had to build myself way back up. Like most people, the funny thing is a lot of people actually say they wouldn't change anything at all. Like, they'd maybe give themselves some advice about like not beating themselves up as much. Right. So like, don't be so hard on yourself. Like, like, enjoy life a little bit. You're young, like, don't be afraid, to do something that seems a little odd or a little off the path a bit. Like that's usually what the advice is. It's never like, no one says anything about regret. And I think that's an important message for young people, is embrace the journey and accept there will be some mistakes and bumps and bruises. And it will hopefully make it easier on your just, energy and yourself. But it helps probably by the time you get to the point that most of these people are, to have the right mindset about why you're where you're at. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's like why you are asked to interview, what's your biggest weakness? It's to tell people that I've screwed up, but I've learned from it. And I've moved myself forward from it. I'm a better person because of that weakness, because I'm self-aware and I've done something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I honestly, God, I couldn't sit here and say if I went back in time, I would make some major different decision, right? Like, and again, thinking about the big decisions, like, it would definitely not change where I go to school. I wasn't a Harvard, but like, it was a great school with great people, and I learned plenty. And, I wound up I got my MBA at Northwestern, which was, I'm very proud of. And that was an advice of one of our teachers. We had the same one, Dr. Brunswick. And he said, listen, your undergrad doesn't matter. Like, just finish it, don't graduate with like C's and D's, but like try to get A's and B's and, get out in the world and figure it out. And then once you figure it out a little bit, go get your MBA. Or if you decide on a different field, go get a master's. So he goes, but the master's is what sets you on your path. So like, I wouldn't change any decision. I mean, if anything, maybe I'd go to grad school a little bit younger. I was in my early 30s when I finally went at like 31 or something. But I certainly wouldn't change anything major. Like little bits of advice about maybe like thinking about something this way or that way. I think that the big one is, like the whole don't fret about stuff. So I think it's certainly my own advice would be nothing to regret. Don't over fret yourself. Be small things. Like think about maybe starting this. Don't wait too long or something. I don't know. But I really wouldn't change a whole lot, and a lot of it comes down to don't fret it, or don't overthink it, because that's another one. You overthink some of these decisions, and you'll hear this in the podcast and some of the conversations, and I'm sure with any mentor or a career advisor, like you overthink some of these decisions because you don't have the experience of it. But that's where I think this mentoring and advisory thing really comes into play. Did I probably set that up for you?
Well, it's funny too, but you made me go down my path too, and thinking about it, and it's like, yeah, you're right. But like, yeah, I think that's the other thing we saw, like why this was important as part of our as part of the association and part of our mentoring committee, was that in all your interviews too, like mentoring shows up and was an important role in everyone's career, and who they picked and who was helped them along the way, because no career path is all by themselves, or very few are. They've leaned on, at a minimum, their own managers, and we've seen that from those that are internal and external in their careers. So I think that was a very important thing to show, and like, has it played an important role in your career? And if so, can you share some?
Yeah. So, I mean, personally, mentoring is a massive deal to me. Everyone on the show talks about it too. I mean, almost every conversation talks about a mentor, but the thing that I think is important to differentiate is I think there's mentors and I think there's advisors, right? And the reason it's so important to think of it that way is like a mentor is a really big undertaking. Like having a mentor being a mentor or being a mentee, like I think it's a much bigger undertaking than anyone really appreciates until they've really had a good mentor-mentee relationship, right? Like, I mean, because you need a mentor that is going to kind of
serious, right? I mean,
they
need to be taking it serious, and they've made a commitment to that person.
They absolutely, but they have to be
too, right?
You have to have the commitment, no question, right? Like, that's a big deal. But I think you have to really be prepared, as the mentor, to kind of be a pain in the ass about some things, right? Like you've got to be willing to like tell someone stuff that they don't want to hear, right? Because that's what a mentor has to do. They have to, the thing about mentor, and I actually put this on my notes when I was kind of preparing for this discussion, assuming you were going to ask about mentors, because this is a mentoring committee, right? Or you're the mentoring committee chairman, was that, I think a good mentor has to be somebody to you who's like unbiased, right? Like very objective. Like they have to have something to like, I don't know, this is why I always tell people you can't have somebody in your organization, especially like a supervisor, like a manager, or even like the step above them as a mentor, because as much as they might be a brilliant advisor to you, right? They're super great person, great leader, whatever it is, like at the end of the day, it's very difficult for them to be objective and unbiased, because if you come to them and say, I want to move to North Carolina, like my heart's in North Carolina, and the company doesn't have a remote work policy, it's hard. It would be hard for them to give you the right advice because they want you to stay where you're at. Maybe not in your role, but they would want to try to figure out, like whatever, when the right decision for you or the right choice for you is to go to North Carolina and find something else and just, whatever. So I think the whole thing about mentoring really starts with an understanding that it's not an easy process. It takes both people to kind of cultivate it and nurture it, right? Like, I think the thing that happens is sometimes you get into these programs and they assign a mentor, and then people are like, all right, well, we're going to meet once a month for coffee, right? And yeah, it's good. And again, I think it turns into a good advisory type of program, right? But I think it's on the mentee to move it from advisor to mentor, right? The mentee has to take the steps. And that's what I think, unfortunately, can be a missed opportunity for people that need that relationship, is they don't realize it's on me to prepare my mentor for this discussion every week or every month or every quarter or whatever the frequency is. So I think those are the things, especially from the conversations we've had, like that I've learned and certainly reinforced how it's affected me. Right now, ironically, I would say one of my best career mentors was assigned to me. There was a woman at Borders. She was a VP. I mean, I'm going to use a name. Try not going to use names in general because I don't want anyone to feel like, well, you didn't use my name. Like, I love you all. But like Susan Zwicky was absolutely somebody like in my career, or like, you want to talk about, like, I was going down this way and she was like a hard right turn in some ways to go a different way. And it put me on a path that I thought I was like, I got to be in marketing. I want to be in marketing. I wanted to be in sports marketing. Like this whole path was around marketing. And I was still like at 24 years old. I'm like, I'm got a marketing degree. I'm going to be a marketer. And she got assigned to me in this this mentoring program of Borders Group. And, after about like 3 months of, listen to me rant and rave about being a marketer, she was like a VP of ops. She's like, I don't think you're a marketer. and she gave me her reasons why, and she was trying to help me think about other things to do or in marketing, like what I thought it would be. And so she kind of starts pushing me out of this kind of single threaded marketing track thinking. And then about, like, I don't know, it must have been a year later, 6 months or a year later, she kind of pulls me in her office and says, listen, like, I know this is you've never asked me about this, and I don't know if you have any interest in it, and I'm not going to be offended if you say you don't have interest in it. But she's like, I have a logistics job for you. And I'm like, logistics? No way, right? And she's like, fine, listen, I tell you what, go have lunch with my, one of her directors, right? Like one of the guys that reports her. Go have lunch with him. See what you think of him. He'll talk to you about it because he kind of used to do the job, and we brought him in and see what you think. And I'm this guy took me out to lunch, and I'm like this coolest guy on the planet, right? Like we had so much fun at lunch, and he talked about the job, and he just changed the perspective of what logistics was and what they were doing on that team, and whatever, like this whole thing. And like from that point forward, I mean, I've never had a marketing title ever again, and I've never looked back. And again, I think that's what the mentor responsibility is. Now, granted, I just broke two of the things that I said I think don't make great mentors. Like, it was assigned to me, and she essentially got me onto her team, so she probably has some bias there. But it was more impactful to me because it took me out of this track that I was on. And it was a big moment. And I'll tell you, mentoring plays a huge role, but I think it's important. Mentoring is deep, right? Like you're going deep. You need that person to be comfortable with who you are. They need to be honest with that person. I mean, I think that's another mistake I see with mentoring is people aren't really honest with themselves. So therefore they're not honest with the mentor. So the mentor winds up giving them sort of generic advice and, follow your passion kind of stuff. But you need that person if you are, if you're not honest with yourself and you're not honest with them, then they can't help you. And that's what I think a mentor, the mentor needs to play that role of pushing you to be honest with yourself and then being honest with them. And that's that whole kind of deep commitment, nurturing it, cultivating it, and then recognizing like, you're not going to have a mentor for life. Maybe you will, I don't know. But like for the most part, your mentors are seasonal within a career. Like there's a good mentor early career. Susan Zickley was an excellent mentor for me when I was in my 20s, but I don't use her as a mentor in my life, right? I don't want to, like it's not. I have a different person now that I use, or use. I hate using the word use, but like I have a different person in my life that is playing the role of mentor for me. And when I first time or after we met for the first time, and then the second time I said, I would like for you to be my mentor. Would you be okay with that? That's how I started that discussion. And then whenever we meet,
I want to talk about that too, but I wanted to take a step back about with your mentorship being assigned. Was there a structure put in place for you, for the two of you to follow, or were you just like, she was assigned to you, she showed up and led the way, or because I think that's a big thing, is like, because then I want to get to also like, how do you cultivate that, the mentorship, and also how do you get the nerve to then go ask someone when they know they may, it's someone who will help you, and you don't want to be rejected either, I don't think, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you have to be willing to accept the fact that person might say, listen, I'm not the right person for you. You know what I mean? You have to be prepared for the fact that it's a relationship that you're trying to cultivate. And if someone in that relationship isn't the right person for that relationship, you've got to accept the fact that it's just not the right thing, So I think there's certainly that. I think going back to your question around structure, it's certainly good for young people, because there's sort of that, you don't know what you don't know, right? Like you have a long path of kind of learning and being self-aware and kind of taking some of the bumps and bruises to where you could accept the fact that someone might say no, right? Like, hey, will you be my mentor? I'm sorry, I'm just not the right person right now, whatever. Okay, I appreciate that, thank you. Like be like you really understanding what you need, like how you can approach that person and saying, I'm really struggling with this in my career. I'm really struggling with this part of my journey and I need help with that. Because that to me is there's a critical distinction between advisor and mentor in what I just said. If I call you, and I've done this, if I've called you and run an idea by you, I've known you for 27 years, like we're not in a mentor-mentee relationship, but I certainly have taken career advice from you, and you play an advisory role in that moment. If you have a good network of people, that's great. But the mentor is the one that you're really kind of probably working with, for months or years before that, and then kind of through that. And I think you just are just in a different space as you get a little bit older. Not saying it's perfect or easy and everyone's going to get it and they won't need structure or help. So I think it's certainly a little bit better for the younger person. For me, it was through kind of like a postgraduate or undergraduate program at corporate, where they're taking, you just graduated from college, now you're going to go do this program and you're going to get exposure to the whole company, and we're going to assign you a mentor. And they had us take these tests, like personality tests and things like that, to try to match up who would be a good person. And I think at the time, I don't think I fully appreciated it, but I think the reason I got paired up with who I got paired up with was because I was like marketing. And they're like, all right, guess what? You're going to get this operations person. And it was a good way of kind of, helping mesh that. And then they had a program around, like, you went to lunch and learns with your mentors, right? Like the whole group came together with their mentors and they just hung out with their mentors. And then there was some structure, like the mentors, I think, were given some structure on like what kind of conversations to have with them. You were supposed to have coffee or lunch with them once a month, and like at least once a month, you're supposed to do that. And, so there was some structure. There was the personality tests, there was some frameworks and, formats in place, but it didn't work for everybody. I mean, there was probably, out of 10 people that were in that group, I think 2 or 3 of us that stuck with their mentor, I think. And even now today, the few people, I don't even really talk to a whole lot of those people, but I doubt, I mean, not that I talk to Susan very often, but like Susan's in my March Madness pool every year, you know, like, and
That's
that,
what I was
and,
gonna say, is like,
yeah.
have you developed ones that have, you've kept in touch with them and you still, maybe they're not full-fledged mentors, but they're still in your
Oh
advisor,
yeah, 100%.
right?
Yeah. 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 No, like I said, I mean, I still, you know, try to stay in contact with her. I use this I mean, funny enough, I use this March Madness tool as a way to stay connected with people because I started it when
And
I was on her.
everyone write that down.
Yeah. Well, seriously, I mean,
No.
I started it when I was there. I started this thing when I was 26 years old or something like that. And I do this silly pool for March Madness. So I have all these people that were in the pool when I started it at Borders. And then I had a whole bunch of people in it that were from Shopper Track. And then I have a whole, you know, people from VF when I was at VF. And then I have just local people here that I, you know, now know. So like I have all these people. So now every year I have this annual reminder of like sending out emails. And then I always get to, hey man, what's going on? What are you doing? You know, like that kind of thing. So it's turned into a fun way of just keeping the network alive. So
With that, have you seen qualities of mentors and mentee? Like we talked about the mentee a little bit, like they got to run with the ball because it's your
career. Yeah.
Right? Besides, I guess, is there anything else besides the cornerstones that you mentioned about mentors? You know,
Yeah.
commitment and you know, the honesty there. Do you see anything else that they
Yeah, I mean, I think a mentor, again, I think it's on the mentee to really engage it. I think it's on the mentee to make sure the mentor can help them, right? So those are important things. And I think there's certainly a point in that relationship where the mentor does have to take some responsibility. They can't just sit around and be like, oh, you didn't call me. Like, you know, like I get early on, like it's not on the mentor to be like, oh, you didn't call me. But like the mentor should, you know, if they don't hear from that person, maybe for 3 or 4 months or so, they should make sure they take some proactive steps to keep the relationship going if they know that that person was, you know, in a tricky spot and stuff like that. Or but I do think from a like the mentor side of the relationship is, you know, is really on that like honesty and drawing out the honesty, like, you know, making sure that individual is being honest. Like, you know, like even in some of the questions or the conversations, like being able to say, all right, am I hearing you complain about a situation? And are you giving me the full story? You know, the classic, every story has multiple sides. And that mentor has to be willing and able to kind of get into that with that individual in such a way that they can actually help them. So I think there's certainly that. I think time, you know, like if you are, you know, if you're somebody who's on the road 80% of the time and it's hard to get a hold of or difficult, like a schedule, you know, like you don't want to be a mentor and be like, contact my admin to get on my calendar. Like, I mean, you might be a great advisor or something. But like,
I think that's a great point, is that, you know, I'm not saying no, but maybe I'm just an advisor right now because my time, I don't have the time commitment to give you the mentorship you deserve. Right?
Yeah, I'll have a great cup of coffee with you and we'll have an amazing conversation. But I just don't have the time to give you that is required for a good mentor-mentee relationship.
Yeah, I think that's a key there, is that you could potentially find a bunch of advisors, keep in touch with them, they're part of your network. Maybe at some point, it's a great way to evaluate which one would potentially be the mentor to go after, right?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, your advisors actually, I mean, maybe they become a mentor. I mean, again, you know, it's all about you and your ability to kind of build a network around you for success, right? Like, you know, self-awareness is so important, right? To so much of anyone's, I think, success. And you one of the ways to get there is surrounding yourself with people that can help you understand who you are and whatnot. And those advisors are great because, I mean, again, like just recently I've had a pretty monumental career decision, I think. And I literally was on the phone with 6 or 7 people one Monday morning as I was kind of nearing the end of this decision cycle. And, you know, and they all, I mean, these are all people like Sunday night and Monday morning, I'm like texting them and they're like, yeah, dude, just call me. And I mean, I like 5 hours of phone calls that like literally just came up like that. And they're all like, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, none of them I would say are necessarily mentors, but they're all great because they're part of this group of people that I'm trying to always reach out to, always stay connected to, always, and they do the same thing to me. Like a lot of them are excellent networkers on their part in terms of staying connected to me. And I think they're also then people, if I needed a mentor, I could go to and they'd be like, listen, I got a great person you could talk to, so like you get into their network. So the advisor might not be the mentor, but the advisor could get you to a great mentor.
So I think that probably brings up to like, I think people come in and out of your life, people, and I think some of that potentially is like, should it be informal or formal? And I think it's probably a bit of both. I mean, would you agree? Or because I think a lot of like, especially like with, that's why I kind of asked the question too on, it came up with when it was picked for you, what was was there structure? And like, it's one thing to be put together and then say, okay, what's next?
Yeah. Go like each other. All right.
You have a straw man or an outline to follow
Yeah. First, like, it's just like I said about a career, like it's a personal, unique journey, right? It's you. It has to be comfortable to you. It has to be comfortable to the mentor, right? So like if you need to be sort of casual with how you prep each other, great. I text my men, I text them. I'm just like, hey, we're gonna have coffee tomorrow. Here's something I'm stewing on. Like this is what I'm struggling with right now, or I am. I've had some tricky situations, with some employees and stuff like that. Like, what would you do in this scenario? And so he's thinking, at least he's thinking about it, right? It doesn't require me to he doesn't need me to type up a big, memo and like giving him all the background and all the context or whatever. He'll get that tomorrow, but at least he's coming into the conversation with, I know we're going to talk about a tough situation about an employee or something like that, So I think it's really who you are. I mean, if you like a nice clean outline with headers and objectives and goals and, key outcomes, great. If that's what your mentor needs to be successful for you, great. That's how I think you gotta be able to do it. But again, it's unique to the individual. I just would say you always have to take the step to make sure the mentor understands what you're coming to the conversation with. And sometimes it might simply just be coffee because you're just doing it to stay connected. But if you find that every time every time you're going out for coffee, you're just having coffee, you probably, that individual is not helping you with something, or you're not challenging yourself about something. I don't know if that answered your question or not, but
no, that's great. I mean, I want to give her perspective, and I think that's cool too. I think as we close here a little bit, I just wanted one last question, but I want to take the time too to say thank you for doing this and being a part of the time. Really appreciate it. But I think that too is like you mentioned that you've got a vision for Career Catalyst for the future too, and I guess you can give a little PSA as to what that might be or where it's going next.
Yeah, I mean, I like I said, I really love doing it, and it's certainly tricky because it's not my primary job. You know what I mean? Like it's not the only thing I do, and I mean, it's certainly I actually have two other things that I do, and it's kind of the third thing. So it's certainly finding the time, but it's also wanting to kind of make sure I continue to get people involved in it in a way to draw on the themes, kind of like the themes we talked about here, like good mentoring, good career development, like good kind of self-awareness and leadership. It's field agnostic, like medical field, government field. Like I mean, like those are things that you'd want anyone to be doing, right? Like thinking about how they're navigating their life and their career and some of the advice. So some of it's really trying to make sure I continue to figure out a way to get guests and from, kind of mix it up. And like every season, you're going to get a government one, you're going to get a medical one, you're going to get an education one. So I haven't really sorted that one out. But the thing I have sorted out as I'm going forward with this is really diving into this purpose and passion thing, because that's, again, something that comes up on every conversation. And I think it's a very relevant thing with the kind of under 35, especially, but I think for anybody, it's super important, is the purpose and passion, because it's so generic. right? Like every company is talking about being purposeful, and we want people that have passion for. But at the end of the day, I mean, let's be honest. A lot of those people are like baloney. Like, am I really being purposeful in my work right now? Some people would absolutely 100%, but some people aren't. And you want to get those people to like think, kind of think about, well, what is it, why? And I think that that's been lost in this idea of like find your passion. Listen, I wanted to be in sports because I played football in college with you, and I thought that was my passion. But the reality is, I would be miserable if I stayed in sports. No way. I haven't been in the same role in my career for more than 3 years at a time. Now, granted, I stay within companies, but I need that role to be morphing and changing, and like something to make it interesting. Because if you're not learning, you're not growing, and if you're not growing, you're not going anywhere. And I think that's the whole idea. How I want Career Catalyst to go is to kind of use this whole purpose and passion buzzword now, and kind of blow it up a little bit. Like really start with this idea of like, if someone's telling you to find your passion, they are not giving you good advice. Like they're giving you like generic, easy. They don't know who you are. They don't want to spend the time to get to know what you really want to do. They don't want to push you. You want to talk about mentoring. If you're a mentor and you tell someone they need to find their passion, you're not their mentor. Like you got to be able to like figure out what it is, because passion could be where you live. Passion could be the people you're around. Passion could be the thing that you get to do because of how you work, not what you do for work, right? Like if you love skiing, find a job in the mountains, right? Like a lot, like don't, I'm just using an example, right? If you love kids, you don't necessarily have to be a teacher, right? So, anyways, that's where we're going. Is using this purpose and passion, trying to break it up a little bit, challenge it in a way that help people really think about it in a way that doesn't get.
It's going to be in depth, and you're going to have to really squeeze the turnip to like get that out of that info out of people, I think, right? Like sometimes it's hard for people to explain that, because sometimes it's just a feeling,
Oh, totally. But I don't think that's why I don't think the general format of my questions are going to change. I'm not going to start what's your passion, right? I that's what I was learning and how I was asking people, because it naturally came out, right? Like, but I really I want to keep the question track the way it is, about assessing their career, the decisions, why they made choices that allow for that purpose and passion to naturally come out. I'm just trying to format it in so it doesn't take 2 hours to get there. You know what I mean? So like
I hear you. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thanks for joining us. And I think now we'll open it up for Q&A and see if any of our viewership has questions for you or me.
That's awesome.
Hey, Todd.
Hey, Brandon, how you doing, buddy? Can you hear me?
Good. I can hear you loud and clear. Wanted to let you know that the questions have come through, and you don't have any layups here, pal. So we have a good viewership here with good questions. So
Good.
easiest ones here we're going to start with is what's the best advice you've received?
Best advice. Well, I mean, again, I think just like we talked about in that conversation, probably a lot of it has to do with context and timing in my life. But, I think it kind of ties back to even that last topic about purpose and passion, right? Like, the idea of not just saying, "Oh, find your passion." It was really about like, where do you want to be in your life? And it wasn't like a 5 year, like, where do you want to be in 5 years? It was like what is it that is important to you? And like when I was in my 20s, it was probably a little bit more about, what access I had to companies or career path. But now it's about being in a place that I can be around my kids faster. I'm not in traffic all day long. It's that. So I think it's more about, where do you want to be now? And do you feel like it's putting you in the right, sort of place in terms of what you want to do over the next 5 years in your life. So I think that's probably one of the one of the one of the things that probably was the best advice I've gotten, kind of in a general way. And I'll give you one more. I think some of the best advice I've probably gotten that probably stands up more and more all over the place, not just in my career, but don't feel like you have to take every hill. You know what I mean? You don't have to fight every battle that you come to, and I think that's important because again, I think even now, but certainly when I was younger, it was always about being right or winning or you know your idea kind of getting across the finish line and feeling like you're going to get rewarded for the perseverance and stuff. And I think the advice over the years has come through in different kind of shapes and sizes, but ultimately, you certainly don't have to win every battle. And I'll tell you where that is the truest. It's at the home front.
That was right. Yeah. Flip that a little bit. What's the best advice you always give out? Is it different, or what you received you give back out to your people, or is it different?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same. I hate thinking that I'm the one giving good advice. I mean, I try to give useful advice. You know what I mean? I mean, a lot of it has to do with how that person uses it and can do something with it. But I certainly, I certainly give advice in the career spectrum along those lines. I mean, one of my favorite kind of groups of people when I interact with them are kind of mid 20, late 20 people, and I usually say that kind of question about like and ask yourself what's the most important thing in your job? Is it where do you work? Right? Like we were just saying, like, do you want to be in the mountains, or do you want to be on the coast, or do you want to be in the big city, or what industry? Like, is there an industry you want to be in because you are super serious about it, or it's something that you believe will give you something purposeful? And I think I always avoid the compensation thing, right? I mean, as much as some people certainly want to say how much money I make so I can do certain things or I can travel, is interesting and seems obvious, but at the end of the day, I think it really comes down to like where is it that you think you are going to be the most happiest in your life, be it physical location, proximity to people that you love, or things that you love to do, or a job that gives you kind of flexibility so you can travel. That's what I think is the best advice I can give people when they're thinking about their career. Um, yeah, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
and then the other thing, I
I
mean, I
think
guess, yeah, there you go.
the thing that popped in my head is the COVID's taught me is like just the question going back to my team is, are you okay? What's your
Yeah,
headspace?
yeah,
Like, we haven't been together for so long, and this thing it still holds true, even after being back to the office. Um, Making sure people are in a good headspace, and that behind the camera is a person, and
yeah,
actually
yeah.
making sure they're well and
No,
caring for them. Just seems
no,
simple, but goes a long way.
yeah, yeah. I think you're absolutely
So
right. Like, I think that's yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, let's say there's like a ton more questions, so I'll just keep to ramble through as many as I can. Uh,
Sure.
is it best to have a mentor you already know or have a relationship with, or someone you do not, and why?
I'm sorry. Ask the first part. I didn't hear the first part of the question very well.
Is it best to have a mentor you have a relationship with already, or someone you do not, and why?
Well, I certainly I do believe relationships with people that have been mentors for me. Um, I think you know I yeah. I mean, I still try to stay connected to some people even from the early part of my career. And again, I think it's because they were so influential. I mean, there's an individual that he was actually my boss, so he was probably a little less of a true mentor, more of just a great human being in my life. But because of the time when he was my boss, he was so impactful to who I was and where I've kind of gotten to. So I certainly try to stay connected to him. And unfortunately, there's another person that was hugely impactful in my career, and they've passed away, and that was tough. I mean, I even know today, like every couple of weeks, there's moments where I wish I could pick up the phone and call him, and that's the reason why I unfortunately can't talk to him anymore. But I certainly try to remember the things that he kind of taught me. Um, I think there's other people, I'll say this. I mean, I think there's some other people that have been influential in my career and I can learn from. But for some reason, there's just a personality block. You know what I mean? Like, there's just, I don't know. I don't like admitting it. And it's like a little
Yeah, I think I
too
lean
human,
on,
maybe.
yeah, I kind of
Yeah.
lean on what you said in the past about, or in our interview about like the relationship could be either, as long as you get that honesty and that objectivity that you're not always going to get fed exactly what you want to hear.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that in the relationship, whether you need to can get that from someone you already have a relationship with, or go find that stranger to find that truth, is probably
Yeah.
what you want to go after.
Yeah. For sure.
Here's another one. How does the mentor take the relationship, or mentee take the relationship from advisor to mentor? I think it's
Well, I mean, I think the first,
the stars aligning,
yeah,
right? Just that there's all the variables line up. That there's time, effort, and availability, right? But you have any other
yeah,
insights on that?
yeah. I think getting an advisor to move more into kind of a mentor relationship. A lot of it is making sure you're either asking them or making sure they're comfortable with you to challenge you, because I think that's the difference, right? An advisor is going to give you advice, and they probably maybe give you a little bit of tough advice or a little bit of something that you're not thinking of. But I mean, I think a mentor, the key to a mentor relationship is someone who's pushing you, like someone who's going to kind of make you feel a little uncomfortable, really challenge what you think you're challenged, what you're trying to do. And I think that's the big difference between the mentor and advisor. And I think a lot of it, sorry, there's some wind out here. I think a lot of what it takes is really on the mentee, right? Like, preparing the mentor, like giving the mentor some information before that meetup, sending them an email and here are the topics so that that mentor has time to kind of think about what they need to do for you. And then you're right. I mean, I think then it's also just time, right? The more they get to know you, the more they're comfortable giving you the tougher kind of advice or pushback or pushing you in a certain way, the better. And that's I think those are the kind of ingredients to a good mentor slash, kind of, or mentor relationship that's evolved from an advisory type of relationship.
All right. Or believe it or not, we're already at time. Uh, I think we should we'll table some of these questions and probably, I'll try to get Todd to answer them and we'll get them posted when we put our recording up on the website, just so that none of these go to waste, because these are good questions that we didn't get to. Thanks for your participation, everyone. I'd like to Todd Starsovich for all your time and effort with Career Catalyst. And I guess key takeaway there is that if you got nowhere to look right now for some advisorship or how to advance your career, is potentially take a look at those podcasts and we'll get your insights from there, as well as potentially give you somewhere to start. And then I'd like to thank the NCSA for taking the time to put a stake in the ground on mentorship, and also the funding behind it. And also Audra Vogler, my co-chair for mentoring. Thank you as well for being behind the scenes and helping uh, get this published. I'd like to thank everyone again. We'll follow up with a posting of the recording and hopefully put out a survey for you and get feedback on what we should do next. So thanks for your time today. I appreciate it, everyone.
Thanks, Brandon. Yeah.